Welcome to edupediaworld.com. This is Somjajay Nair, your online biology tutor. In this video, we are going to discuss about organisms and populations. In the last video, we had discussed about different biomes and different abiotic factors. Population. In nature, we rarely find isolated single individuals of any species. Majority of them live in groups in a well-defined geographical area, share or compete for similar resources, potentially interbreed and thus constitute a population. Although the term interbreeding implies sexual reproduction, a group of individuals resulting from an even asexual reproduction is also generally considered as a population for the purpose of ecological studies. Population attributes. A population has certain attributes that an individual organism does not. An individual may have births and deaths, but a population has birth rates and death rates. In a population, these rates refer to per capita births and deaths respectively. A. Birth rate or natality. It is the ratio of live births in an area to the population of an area. It is expressed as the number of individuals added to the population with respect to the member of the population. B. Death rate or mortality. It is the ratio of deaths in an area to the population of an area. It is expressed as the loss of individual with respect to the members of the population. Here is an example. If in a pond there are 20 lotus plants last year and through reproduction 8 new plants are added, taking the current population to 28. We calculate the birth rate as 8 divided by 20, that is 0.4 offsprings per lotus per year. If 4 individuals in a laboratory population of 40 fruit flies dies during a specified time interval, say a week, the death rate in the population during that period is 4 by 40, that is equal to 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per week. Another attribute characteristics of a population is sex ratio. An individual is either a male or a female, but a population has a sex ratio. Example, 60% of the population are females and 40% of the population are male. Sex ratio is the number of males or females per 1000 individuals. Then the next attribute is age distribution. It is the percentage of the individuals of different ages in a given population. At any given time, the population is composed of individuals that are present in various age groups. The age distribution pattern is commonly represented through age pyramids. The shape of the pyramid reflects the growth status of the population. A. Whether it is growing. B. Whether it is stable or is it declining. Population density, that is the last attribute. It is defined as the number of individuals of a population present per unit area at a given time. This is a representation of age pyramids for human population. Population growth. The size of a population for any species is not a static parameter. It keeps changing in time depending on various factors including food availability, predation pressure and reduced weather. In fact, it is these changes in population density that gives us some idea of what is happening to the population, whether it is flourishing or declining. Whatever might be the ultimate reasons, the density of a population in a given habitat during a given period fluctuates due to changes in 4 basic processes, 2 of which are natality and immigration contribute an increase in population density, and other 2 are mortality and emigration to decrease the population growth. Basic processes which cause fluctuations in population growth. Natality refers to the number of births during a given period in the population that are added to the initial density. Mortality is the number of deaths in the population during a given period. Immigration is the number of individuals of the same species that have come into habitat from elsewhere during the time period under consideration. Emigration is the number of individuals of population who left the habitat and gone elsewhere during the time period under consideration. This is the diagrammatic representation of the basic processes which cause fluctuation in the population growth. If n is the population density at time t, then its density at the time t plus 1 is n into t plus 1 is equal to nt plus b plus I minus d plus e. You can see from the above equation that population density will increase if number of births plus number of immigrants, that is b plus I, is more than the number of deaths plus number of immigrants, that is d plus e. Otherwise, it will decrease. Under normal conditions, birth and death are the most important factors influencing the population density. The other two factors assuming importance only under special conditions. For instance, if a new habitat is just being colonized, immigration may contribute more significantly to population growth than birth rate. Growth models. Population growth refers to how the number of individuals in a population increases or decreases with time. The growth is controlled by the rate at which new individuals are added to the population, the birth rate, and the rate at which individuals leave the population, the death rate. These growth models are the statistical model to study the population growth. There are two types of growth models, exponential growth model and logistic growth model. Exponential growth model. Resource, that is food and space availability, is obviously essential for unimpeded growth of a population. Ideally, when resources in the habitat are unlimited, each species has the ability to realize fully in its innate potential to grow in number, as Darwin observed while developing his theory of natural selection. Then, the population grows in an exponential or geometrical fashion. If in a population of size n, the birth rate, not total number but per capita birth, as represented as small letter b, and death rates, again per capita death rates, as small letter d, then the increase or decrease in capital N during a unit time period small t, that is dn by dt is equal to b minus d into n. Let b minus d is equal to r, then dn by dt is equal to rn. Logistic growth model. No population of any species in the nature has at disposal unlimited resources to permit exponential growth. This leads to competition between the individuals for limited resources. Eventually, the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. In nature, a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. Let us call this limit as nature's carrying capacity, that is represented by the capital letter K, for that species in that habitat. A population growing in a habitat with limited resources show initially a lag phase, then followed by phases of acceleration and deceleration, and finally asymptote. When the population density reaches the carrying capacity, that is a plot of n in a relation to time t, result in a sigmoid curve. This type of population growth is called Wurzel-Per logistic growth and is described by the following equation, that is dn by dt is equal to rn into k minus n by k, where n is equal to the population density at time t and r is the intrinsic rate of natural increase and k is equal to the carrying capacity. Since the resources for the growth for most animal populations are finite and become limiting sooner or later, the logistic growth model is considered as the more realistic one than exponential growth model. This is the representation of population growth curve. Here the A, that is the pink color line. When responses are not limiting the growth, then the plot is exponential. B, that is the blue line. When responses are limiting, the growth plot is logistic in nature, and K is represented at the carrying capacity. Life history variation. Populations evolve to maximize their reproductive fitness, and also called Darwinian fitness, with high R value, in habitat in which they live. Under a particular set of selection pressures, organisms evolve towards the most efficient reproductive strategy. Some organisms breed only once in their lifetime, Pacific salmon fish, bamboo, while others breed many times during their lifetime, that is the most birds and mammals. Some produce a large number of small-sized offspring, example oysters, pelagic fishes, while others produce small number of large-sized offspring, Birds and mammals are the examples. Ecologists suggest that life history traits of organisms have evolved in relation to the constraints imposed by the abiotic and biotic components of the habitat in which they live. Population interactions. In nature, population of different species in a habitat do not live in isolation but interact in many ways. Depending on the outcome, these interactions between two species are classified as competition, that is, both species suffer. Predation and parasitism, one benefit and other suffer. Commensalism, one benefit and the other is unaffected. Ammensalism, one is harmed and the other is unaffected. And mutualism, both species. Competition. Competition takes place when each of two populations affect the others adversely. Typically, both the require same resources that are in short supply. The presence of each population inhibits the others. For example, sea anemones compete for territory in tide pools. The male-male competition in red deer during rut, the mating time, is an example of interference competition within a species. Predation. In ecosystem, predation is a biological interaction where a predator, an organism that is hunting, feed on its prey, the organism that is attacked. Predators may or may not kill their prey prior to feeding on them, but the act of predation often results in death of its prey and the eventual absorption of the prey tissue through consumption. Thus, predation is often, though not always, carnivory. Other categories of consumption are herbivory, eating parts of plant, mycophagy, eating parts of fungi, and detritivory, the consumption of dead organic matter, detritus. For example, male leopard preying on Indian bison and the Venus flytrap trap its prey. Parasitism. Parasitism is a non-mutual symbiotic relationship between species where one species, the parasite, benefit at the expense of the other, the host. Traditionally, parasite in the biological usage referred primarily to the organism visible to the naked eye or macroparasites such as helminths. Then parasites can include microparasites also, which are typically very smaller, such as protozoa, viruses and bacteria. Examples of parasites include the plant mistletoe and cuscuta and animals such as hookworms. These are the examples, that is the spider parasite by larva called Acrodactyla quadriscripta, and the fish which is parasited by a parasite in the mouth, a lithoganthus fish, that is parasite by Simotha exigua parasite. Commensalism. Commensalism is a class of relationship between two organisms where one organism benefits from other without affecting it. This is in contrast with mutualism, in which both organisms benefit from each other, Ammensalism, where one is harmed while the other is unaffected, and parasitism, where one benefits while the other is harmed. The examples are commensalism between suckerfish and shark. Then phoretic mites on a fly, Pseudolincia canarensis. Then the tick birds benefit, that is insect and water buffalo are not affected, is also an example of commensalism. Ammensalism, any relationship between organisms of different species in which one organism is inhibited or destroyed while the other organism remains unaffected. Redwood trees falling into the ocean, becoming floating, battering rams during storms, killing large number of mussels. Then another example is antibiosis, in that one microorganism growing will inhibit the growth of the another microorganism. Mutualism, two organisms of different species exist in a relationship in which each individual benefits from the activity of the other. For example, crocodiles and Egyptian plover bird. The tiny Egyptian plover bird picks the leftover food from the crocodile's mouth and eats it. The crocodile opens his mouth and lets the Egyptian plover bird go in his mouth, and plover bird does so. So they both get something good out of this. Another example is bees and butterflies feed on the sweet nectar of the purple cornflower, which in turn disperses the pollen seed for the flower to reproduce. This is the representation of the population interaction. When the species A and species B is benefited, it is called mutualism. When both are not benefited, it is competition. When one is benefited and one is not, it is a predation. And in parasitism also, one is benefited and other is affected. And in commensalism, one is benefited and other is not affected. And in the Ammensalism, one is destroyed and other is not affected. Thus I am winding up the chapter. Thank you. In the next video we will be moving towards the next chapter, the ecosystems.